It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Regina Parnell, my friend, my colleague, and you're in for a treat today. Dr. Parnell is a faculty member in the Wayne State University Occupational Therapy Program, where she has enjoyed teaching and influencing the development of many new clinicians over the past 26 years. She is a proud Warrior alum, having received her PhD in medical sociology from Wayne State University. In addition to teaching, Dr. Parnell has continued to provide occupational therapy part-time in mental health settings to ensure that she can offer contemporary patient scenarios to students in our classroom. Her primary research interests focus on the health and well-being of minority community members, including homeless children and adolescents. Please welcome her today as she shares some of her study outcomes on the challenges and triumphs of hurried African American mothers in the Detroit area and additional information about seasonal affective disorder. So join me in welcoming Dr. Regina Parnell.
Thank you. Thank you, Doreen. Great. Thank you for this privilege. I'm going to go ahead and get started because I've got quite a few slides and I'm going to share my screen. So the name of my talk is It Is Well With My Soul, Black Hurried Women Find Help in Times of Trouble. I hope that you find it interesting, enlightening, relevant, and useful. During the course of this talk, I will define the concept of hurriedness and discuss how it intersects with race for Black working mothers. I'll review the methodology and findings from my 2007 study on hurried Black women with a focus on their stressors and their stress management skills. Additionally, I will present some information on seasonal affective disorder, and I'll conclude with an invitation to discuss ways perhaps we can apply this information. The women in this study were asked if they felt hurried, and I'll share a typical observation. After minutes of simultaneously tidying the house, prepping meal for her special needs daughter, and talking on the phone with her father's caregiver, Kathy, a Black married working mother of 3, finally plopped down in a chair, looked at the clock, and then at me pensively and began the conversation. You want to know if I feel hurried? For the remainder of the interview, the tenor and temper of Kathy's responses fluctuated, mirrored by her changing demeanor. Fatigue, anger, fear, determination, unrest, resignation, gratefulness, and contentment. Black culture, though not overtly referenced, was omnipresent, obvious in her verbiage, observed in her choice of cuisine, noted in her geographical location, evident in her pool of resources, discernible in her familiar relationships, and apparent in her hopes and concerns. Hurriedness has been defined as the perception of having too little time to complete meaningful life tasks, resulting in feeling rushed while engaging in life's occupations. Hurriedness has also been shown to increase with parenthood, especially for working mothers with children under the age of 5. Concepts related to hurriedness can be found in the literature under multiple labels such as harried, time scarcity, time pressures, time squeeze, time poverty, all terms referring to the extreme busyness and feeling of falling behind on tasks, and sometimes evident by missing deadlines or tardiness. Interestingly, some epidemiologists have even investigated time scarcity as another health disparity, noting that when you add paid work to unpaid caring workloads, you change the allotment of time that women can spend with their families, and it compounds the barriers to good health. Further in the health arena, hurriedness has been associated with some specific conditions such as hurried sickness in 1999, hurried women's syndrome in 2005, and rushing women's syndrome in 2017. These orders are correlated with a range of health symptoms, including fatigue, exhaustion, weight management challenges, low libido, mood disorders, sleep deprivation, blood pressure spikes, and even irritability. Each condition suggests that women who manage hurriedness experience these symptoms due to their extended periods of pressure and the frenetic pace they keep to meet all their daily task requirements. Although hurried women syndromes are associated with multiple role engagement, two key roles, parenting and employee, are particularly associated with the hurriedness. Black mothers in the workforce, like many other working mothers, face evolving occupational demands, and according to some investigations, they feel pressured in the midst of completing their daily routines. Studies examining hurried women in general note that despite feeling overextended and vulnerable to physical and emotional ailments, study participants find ways to manage some of their expanding roles and responsibilities. And while this is likely true for working Black mothers, targeted research is needed to better understand their experience with hurriedness and its impact on their overall well-being. There's some existing research specific to working African-American mothers, but it's limited and the findings have been mixed. Some studies have reported negative outcomes, finding that hurriedness in life occupations cause diminished health. Other studies have shown positive outcomes, such as the use of effective coping and an enhanced sense of well-being. Notably, in the Black community, related terms like strong Black woman or superwoman have long been used to refer to hardworking African-American mothers who not only struggle to achieve life balance, but who also face additional social pressures, but yet must appear invincible in the face of overwhelming role demands. Health literature on the welfare of strong Black women establishes a link between their lifestyle and their health status, and also indicates that Caucasian women facing similar occupational challenges experience less severe health ailments than Black women. These observations suggest that Black mothers, a minority population facing social and cultural inequity, may experience a type of hurriedness which places them at disproportionate risk for more serious health ailments. So armed with this information, I embarked on a study of hurried Black women from the Detroit area. Recruiting participants primarily through convenience and snowball sampling, and which was just, of course, giving the flyer to women that I knew who fit the criteria and asking them to pass it along to women in their circles who they felt fit the criteria for hurried women. And women qualified as hurried if they were married, currently employed, and the mother of at least one child 18 or younger. It was a mixed method study. The quantitative study packet had a number of formal assessments. So there were stress measures where I looked at roles, how many roles did they have, what kind of discrimination experiences they had, what were their recent stressors. I even asked them to complete a daily chart for me, one to represent their busiest day and one their least hurried day. There were a number of health measures. They completed a depression scale, a fatigue scale, a libido scale, a health symptom scale with 33 health symptoms, and then their weight was measured 3 different ways. So it was very involved for the quantitative component. Additionally, there was a qualitative interview where they were asked if they thought they were hurried. I asked them to describe a typical work day, what was their marriage like, what was motherhood like, if they felt hurried and how they felt it impacted their health, what were their feelings about being Black across all of their roles, did they feel that being Black impacted their health, and then how did they cope with the different stressors in their life. 91 women completed the study, and a typical participant was 41 years old, resided and worked in Detroit. They had been married for 14 years, had 2 children, and attended church regularly. She had a bachelor's degree and worked full-time and considered herself middle class. Now, the overall outcomes showed that these women experienced significant stress related to their multiple roles and responsibilities, with the additional stress of a personal experience of racial discrimination in their lifetime. The women also identified a range of physical and emotional health symptoms, yet they considered themselves to be in relatively good health. Further, these women utilized mostly positive coping skills in response to their myriad stressors and frequently matched the stress management technique to the specific stress that they encountered. So now let's look more closely at some outcomes related to their stress and their stress management. Am I hurried? Yes, yes, I am. In addition to being wives, mothers, and employees, the women discuss other responsibilities related to at least 5 other roles. They were aunties, church members, daughters-in-law, nieces, sisters, sorority members, students, volunteers. They were then responsible for completing tasks that accompanied each of those additional roles. I will note here that mothering was identified as the most important and satisfying role, followed by wife and employee. The women acknowledged having busy days and described how they were in perpetual motion from the time they arose until the time they returned to bed, engaging mostly in work and parenting related tasks. Their responses often emphasized action words to describe their busiest moments. For instance, even before they rushed to get the kids to school and themselves to work, they had run up the stairs, jumped in the shower, hurried to get dressed, and thrown something on the stove for breakfast. Typically, their day began between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning and ended between 10 and 11 p.m., essentially creating a 16-hour workday with minimal rest periods for themselves. And a number of women noted to me that they had to make time to go pee. So these were women who were hurried. Faced with these stressors, there was also evidence that women found ways to manage that busyness and even attain a degree of well-being. So their number one strategy was planning, active planning. They were making charts, keeping calendars. They made schedules for all the moving parts in their lives and for their family. They had extracurricular duties. They had volunteer duties where they had to provide snacks, but they managed most of that with keeping charts and planning. They also had instrumental support, which means they enlisted the help of others. They coordinated carpooling. If you drop off the kids, I'll pick them up. And if grandma was a part of that rotation, they made sure she had a schedule too. I was surprised by this one. They did job modification. So a number of women said that they went part-time or even changed jobs when that work conflicted with mothering. So they actively made room for the things that were most important for them. They were learning to say no. And I will say painfully learning to say no to additional tasks because they were still managing guilt with that. They always felt like they had to say yes to all that they were asked to do. So they were learning to say no. They multitasked, doing this while doing that, cleaning, cooking, supervising homework, folding laundry, checking on parents. But they also admitted some tasks. They told me that they would skip some duties, usually cooking, maybe run out to McDonald's or some aspects of housework. This was not really a break for them, but it was a way of lightening their load periodically. But their favorite thing was sneaking away. And every time a woman related this, she would look around and lower her voice as if someone may overhear. And she'd say, I drop off the kids, sneak back home and take a nap, and then indulge in a guilty pleasure. So it was like that unexpected thrill of a snow day that we feel. The women, that was just a thrilling experience for them, and they did it enough to help sustain their well-being. When I considered hurriedness and physical well-being, both quantitative and qualitative measures revealed a range of physical health symptoms and complaints. The most prevalent complaints were fatigue, weight gain, impaired sleep, and headaches. There were also complaints of back pain and assorted bodily pain complaints. And I was thinking it was just kind of that muscle tension that they may have unconsciously all day to kind of keep all the balls in the air, to keep moving. They had issues from top with stuffy heads to bottom with constipation. They had complaints of numbness, which I really have yet to really try to figure out. And then the inverse relationship showed up for libido, which means that it was not problematic. And we'll talk about that. There were primarily 4 ways these women managed their physical symptoms. So in terms of exercise, diet, and weight, I use the word fortitude. We could say determination, strong-willed, resilient. It wasn't that they were successful at all their dieting and eating healthy approaches, but it was always their goal. 78% of my sample was overweight. 75% of them had weight loss goals. So they had that future hope of being able to accomplish this one day, and they did not give up on that goal. In terms of support, when women, they noted if they got ill, they had that social network that jumped in to help them. So if they complained of female-related illnesses, they had their group that they could talk to about what they should do and how to manage it. They would get advice from them. And then there was instrumental support where if one of the women had to be ill and off from work for a day, someone would take care of the kids, pick them up, drop them off, even make dinner, maybe cover their role commitments related to volunteer or even at work. So they had social support networks that helped them manage those physical complaints. I think foundational to the health complaints were also planning and spiritual practices. So for planning, they were aware of their personal and familial health risk, and they did attend to their health. So if they needed to make doctor's appointments, that was one thing that did not fall off for them. They made sure that they made all of the female-related appointments for themselves. That was a self-care task that remained intact. If they needed or felt they needed some over-the-counter medicine to help them get through the day with headaches or pain or sleep, they also did that. And then when it came to libido, that was also planned. It was scheduled, anticipated, and accommodated. So it was not an issue. Spiritual practices, there was a whole lot of praying about illnesses and fatigue and a sense of explicitly trusting God for their strength for daily needs. And that was mentioned as we walked through many of the interviews. These women experience some emotional signs and symptoms that you might expect from women who are hurried most days and who have to negotiate time to care for their own well-being. They had depressive symptoms, which I label low mood. They were labile. They had negative thoughts about themselves and their abilities. They had twinges of guilt, irritability, felt emotionally drained, a range of emotions from disgust to anger to angst. They would admit and describe everything related to depression, but you cannot call it depression when you are talking to a Black audience. So, and it was so bad that I even had one woman describe depression and her symptoms, but she waved her hand at me and she could not even say the word. So it's a very taboo thing to have mental health issues in the Black community. Anxiety, they had anxiousness, they talked about tremors, feeling lightheaded, transient fear of doom and panic. So these were symptoms that they had. But their biggest fear was cognitive concerns and the early onset of dementia. So when they had trouble concentrating, or they forgot something on their long to-do list, they went straight to, hope I'm not getting Alzheimer's. So that was a frequent refrain that I heard in response to that. Their qualitative and quantitative responses also reveal 6 broad categories or ways that they handled their emotional health. So these women, they gave themselves permission to cry in the car, in the shower, or in some safe space. They had an opportunity to give themselves that release. There were spiritual practices, praying, meditating, seeking God's help with managing their emotions and their behaviors. Now you can, we go back and forth on this next one, venting. Whether it's a positive coping skill or a negative coping skill, that whole verbal release and tirade. They did it in safe spaces. And I had one lady say, I lost it. It was ugly. God forgive me, but I feel better. So they did practice some level of venting to help them manage their emotional well-being. They had social support from their spouse, but they often complained that they had to tell them what to do, but the support was there. There were some who did seek professional help, but it was generally secondary to a physical ailment. So if it was a physical ailment with an emotional component, then that was acceptable to accept help or medicine for that. But often it was counsel with a clergy or a religious leader, someone from the faith community. Their number one and perhaps most effective strategy was the girls' night out. That when they talked about it with me, they were giggling and thinking about how much fun they would have. It was time spent with mothers who intuitively understood the emotional toll of being hurried. So for these next 2 slides, I'm really going to stick to the script because this stressor could be a standalone presentation. There were additional race-based factors that these mothers had to manage, and I labeled them discrimination, representation, and preservation. So in terms of discrimination, they talked about facing macro and microaggressions based on their race. They've had overt discrimination with name calling, blocked opportunities at work, even being followed around stores that weren't even high-end stores. And then there was latent bias, being told that they were well-spoken for a Black person, or addressing a white companion, having someone address a white companion instead of them, or being mistaken for a service worker, or intimating that they were a token to meet a quota. So they all had these experiences on some level. Interesting, when I was first putting this together, there was a report on a news station where two healthcare workers who had recently gotten the COVID vaccine were interviewed. One was a male of South Asian descent dressed in scrubs. The other was a Black female dressed in work clothes. And the caption for the Asian male said something like Dr. Avery Brown, MD. And the caption for the Black female read something like Ravi Patel, nurse. And I immediately thought, I think some assumptions, some unconscious bias was made when this piece was edited, because clearly the Black woman was the doctor and the Asian gentleman was the nurse. And this happens a lot. There were issues of representation. When they were the only Black on the job site, they felt like people assumed they represented and could be the spokesman for the whole Black race in every questionable thing that they did. They felt pressure to be better than in order to succeed. And if they failed, they felt it would reflect poorly on the whole Black race. If they were the first in a position and they feared that if they messed up, or even if they left voluntarily, that the position might not be filled by a Black. So those were additional burdens that they carried in the workplace. And then in terms of preservation, it's that heightened sense of duty required to keep Black children safe, and especially young Black males safe. So you've heard about the Black talk that happens formally and informally over time on how to educate their children to be safe in society, what boys need to do, what girls need to do. There's also two additional roles that fell out that I didn't anticipate. One was to be a mentor to young Blacks in their purview, and the other was to advocate for the needs of Blacks in their community. So there was two additional roles that these women felt that they had to take on. The toll of having to endure cultural bias may elicit physical and emotional symptoms, but it definitely affects the soul. So where did they find soul support? Their social networks. They formed alliances with those who understood this part of the Black experience, where no explanation was needed for what they felt. They shared encouraging words, strategies to succeed, and buttressed each other in order to be successful in their work endeavors. They learned to be proactive and not reactive, preparing and steeling themselves to be ready to navigate racially challenging settings. So they found out about the do's and don'ts of where they were going to be. And interestingly, in terms of being proactive, we also saw this, or I also saw this in how they named their children, that they purposely would steer away from very ethnic names, and even for the girls, give them gender neutral names so that when someone, as they say, read their resume, they wouldn't know if they were Black or white. They benefited from acknowledging wins. In a society where Black accomplishments are minimized or erased and failures are magnified, they reveled in the successes of Black people. A lot of first, we're still seeing first for Black achievement. So you can think in politics with Barack and Michelle Obama, in sports, but even in their families, when someone gets into a prestigious school or completes a degree or gets a promotion, those things were really celebrated. There was positive reframing. They used poems, proverbs, maxims, positive affirmations to help them view the negative circumstances in ways that empowered them. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger, I would hear. But what I heard most often and consistently was, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. They reported times of venting, again in safe spaces with like people, but they did have a release of the rage related to managing culturally biased sites. And then there was behavior disengagement. Now, typically this is thought of as a negative coping mechanism, but in this stead, I interpreted it in a positive way. It was taking a break from the racial tensions, seeking all Black settings where they did not have to be on guard. It was a time to restore their souls. When I saw this finding, it reminded me of a stage performance I saw as a child, and it was a play called A Day of Absence. It's a satirical play about racism in an imaginary Southern town when all the Black people mysteriously disappear. Being MIA from this town was a time of respite for the missing Black folk and a time of discovery for the white townspeople who realized how interwoven and essential the Black residents were, although they were subjugated, in the fabric of their daily lives. Now, since it's Black History Month, I will give you this additional piece. There's a twist in the play when the audience finds out that some of the white people in town also disappeared. I'll leave you to ponder what aspect of the Black experience that tidbit speaks to. So as we shift gears to discuss another stressor, my disclaimer is that I'm not a psychiatrist nor a psychologist. Although my professional expertise is in providing occupation-based interventions to individuals managing mental health conditions, I cannot speak with the authority of a physician. Therefore, I consulted two psychiatrists about this topic. Dr. Anulin Newsom and Dr. Arlene Payton are both Black female physicians, both with over 35 years of experience, and they have practiced in the East, Midwest, South, and Southwest. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, many people go through short periods of time when they feel sad or just not like themselves. Sometimes these moods coincide with the change in seasons. Some people experience the winter blues. That is, they start to feel down when the days get shorter in the fall and the winter, and begin to feel better in the spring when we have longer daylight hours. In some cases, these mood changes become more serious and can affect how a person feels, thinks, and handles activities of daily living. SAD is a type of depression. SAD is not considered a separate disorder, but rather a form of depression characterized by its recurrent seasonal pattern, with symptoms lasting about 4 to 5 months per year. Therefore, the signs and symptoms of SAD include those associated with major depression and some specific symptoms that differ from winter pattern and summer pattern SAD. And not every person will have all of these symptoms. A review of SAD statistics revealed that there's a higher incidence among women than men, which is probably not surprising. That those of us who live farther from the equator, either south or north, are at higher risk because we have shorter days and longer nights in the winter months. And then in case you're curious about Michigan, if you don't count the partially sunny days, we only have 10 fully sunny days in the winter and 75 fully sunny days annually. So we are definitely at risk. SAD often manifests in young adulthood, and there's a higher risk for those who have a history of depression, bipolar disorder, and other mental health diagnoses. And if there's a family history of SAD, then it also is a risk factor. So what does major depression look like? Symptoms of major depression may include feeling depressed most of the day, nearly every day, losing interest in activities you once enjoyed, experiencing changes in appetite and weight, having problems with sleep. Now, I would say here that both of the doctors said to remind you that disrupted sleep patterns contribute to all psychiatric conditions and to many physical health conditions. People who have major depression also feel sluggish and agitated, have little energy. There are feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. There's difficulty concentrating and even thoughts of death and suicide. So major depression plus winter pattern SAD means the person is also oversleeping, overeating, and particularly craving carbs, experiencing weight gain, and becoming socially withdrawn, hibernating. Summer pattern SAD, which is less common, but it does occur. The patient has bipolar or hypomania symptoms as the individuals find the sun too stimulating. So they then have trouble sleeping, decreased appetite and weight loss. They become restless and agitated with feelings of high anxiety and could even experience episodes of violent behavior. Causes specific to winter pattern SAD, which is the most common presentation affecting about 4 to 6% of the population, include some neurological and biochemical changes related to the reduction in sunlight. So we see a decrease in serotonin in people with SAD and a reduction in this brain chemical which regulates mood, causes people to have problems. And then we see vitamin D deficiencies due to the limited winter sunshine, which may exacerbate mood problems. Vitamin D, particularly in African Americans, tend to be low also because we have a natural sunblock built into our skin with a high melanin. On the other hand, people with SAD experience an increase in melatonin, the hormone needed to regulate the normal sleep-wake cycle, and that overproduction of melatonin will increase sleepiness. And also there's an increase in the negative thoughts and feelings about winter and its associated limitations and the stresses of the season. Both physicians offered some general recommendations for managing SAD, and they said these are things that we can take for granted. First, let's work to build resilience before and during the winter season. Get some sun, get outdoors, take advantage of those partially sunny and those fully sunny days. And when indoors, create sunny environments, optimize the natural light, use bright lights, open the shades and the curtains, use vibrant paint colors to invigorate you. Now, traveling, I thought this was a very middle class recommendation, but they said travel to sunny places when you could. Create and maintain a routine. Rise early, go to bed early so that you're up and you can maximize that time that daylight is available to help regulate your mood. Try something new. Creativity sparks new brain pathways and connections and can be cognitively stimulating and alerting. Limit your alcohol. Practice meditation in whatever form that works for you. And then above all, stay connected with people. Do not self-isolate. Now, while these are all good practices, sometimes professional intervention is needed. Managing SAD for some may mean seeking professional help. Both doctors reiterated, everybody can do something. Modify habits, make incremental changes in behavior. But when you've done all you can do, or you can't make the changes, you're not motivated enough, you've got low energy, it is time to seek professional help. And they say, do not just pick a name off a provider list. You want to kickstart this process by meeting with a mental health professional that you know and trust. And if you don't have somebody in your orbit, then check with perhaps an OBGYN or pediatrician or your primary care physician, someone who can vet this person with whom you're seeking to develop a therapeutic alliance. Once you cross that threshold, then you can expect a discussion about your unique symptomology and the various treatment options available to you. So before we talk about treatment, their counsel is not to try to self-diagnose. So of course, in addition to this brief talk, and there's tons of information on the internet, there are protocols for determining a diagnosis of major depression with seasonal patterns, SAD. General criteria includes, but is not limited to, an evaluation of the symptoms of major depression, a determination about the onset and the duration of your symptoms. You want to rule out other symptoms like holiday depression or thyroid disease or cyclical depression, which would be depressed about the anniversary of a loss. And then, of course, there may be medication side effects. Major treatment approaches address the 4 primary causes of SAD. So you can have a prescription for light therapy, but it does need to be under the direction of a physician because there are risks involved. You can have damage to your vision, you can become overstimulated. So I know that there are a lot of light therapy lamps online. They recommend that it happens under the direction of a physician. Of course, there's psychotherapy with the mental health professional helping you to address negative thoughts. There's medication, antidepressants and mood stimulants or mood stabilizers, but they have side effects. So again, under the direction of a physician. And then vitamin D may be prescribed. What I really liked about these 2 psychiatrists is that in addition to traditional medicine, they were open to incorporating some supportive holistic approaches as well. So one of the things they emphasized was exercise. They said, like sleep, exercise broadly impacts both physical and mental health. And in fact, 160 minutes of weekly exercise could be used to treat mild to moderate depression. We had discussions about vitamins and supplements, and they highlighted vitamin Bs to bolster energy and brain function and cell health. They said that regular reflection time, whatever that looked like for you, yoga, prayer, meditation, was helpful in managing SAD. Something as simple as developing a gratitude list. Dr. Payton stressed that nature was healing and restorative. Actually, they both did. But Dr. Payton has had some success with additional bioenergy treatments, massage, tapping, Tai Chi, noting that they need more research, but they were at least open to something beyond traditional medical intervention for SAD. Finally, because of the timing of the onset of winter pattern SAD, we know it's predictable. People with this form of SAD should discuss with their healthcare providers if they want to initiate treatment early to prevent depressive episodes. Some studies have shown favorable outcomes with medications, antidepressants, and so forth, but they do have side effects. And then there's been negligible results with starting light therapy and psychotherapy ahead of time for the onset of SAD. So this is a discussion that you would include when talking with your physician. Now, according to Dr. Payton, and I like her approach here, mood symptoms may come and go, but overall they may remain present. So that's a cue that you need to seek additional help. And she says, everyone has a sign or a symptom that tells them they're at the point of needing assistance. It may be weight changes, it may be extreme irritability or impaired sleep or isolated behavior. You may notice the symptoms before you notice the change in season. And her recommendation is to try and figure out what that step is before you decompensate and get help before you reach that tipping point. Prevention. As I conclude, I wanted to highlight the crossover I noted between symptoms and management strategies of SAD and hurried women. So for both conditions, we had negative thoughts, weight changes, sleep issues, low energy, anxiety, agitation, and cognitive challenges. However, some of the management strategies that hurried women use, such as their active planning, their religious practices, the social networks they have, their exercise goals that are always in front of them, the willingness to use over-the-counter medication to help them manage, limited alcohol, and their use of the healthcare system. These strategies may also mitigate some of their risk for SAD. So I thought that was important to note. Black women who experience stressors because of their myriad role responsibilities, their race, and even their natural environment can and do find help in times of trouble. Help from within, utilizing internal coping strategies. Help from without, connecting with community, church, family, healthcare. It appears that all these resources are accessed and skillfully deployed by hurried Black women to secure the wellness of their souls. Okay, I'm going to unshare and let you guys chime in here.
I just have a quick question. So you touched on, massage therapy, and you touched on exercise. Did you find that, did you talk to anybody that thought that journaling was helpful? Because sometimes I felt that was like, very helpful to me. And I was just wondering if that was a holistic approach that you looked at as well.
I did not directly. When I talked with the psychiatrist, journaling kind of came up under that gratitude charting or that gratitude list. So it would probably fall in there. Yes. But I agree. I think it is a helpful option to manage feelings and stressors.
Sometimes you think something's really bad, and then when you write it down and read it the next day, it wasn't so horrible,
Thank you, Alyssa.
I was thinking there's a word that's out right now. It's called mind dump. It sounds a lot like you're venting. You dump all the thoughts out of your head, and then you let it go. And I use that with students.
Okay, in a controlled environment?
For when they're in therapy.
Okay. All right, yeah. Yeah, I think of it as in a positive way because it's venting, but it's in a controlled environment. It's not just exploding anywhere in the community. It's with someone in a safe space where they feel like they can do it and have control.
So with the mind dump, you can do it verbally or you can do it in a journal where you just write everything down. So it kind of combines the two things.
Yeah. This one was definitely verbal.
I'm curious about exercise. How many women actually found exercising to be, I guess, a release. I hear people say that, but
Well, this population, exercise was something that seemed to always be on their to-do list that they didn't always get to, but they kept it on the list. And so if they did kind of a sneak away day, they might get that nap and they might go exercise after that. So it was always something, it was as if they were pursuing it. And when they did accomplish it, they did feel good about it, but it was hard to keep in their schedule. It was very hard. Yeah.
I am Joan McNeish, and I'm not, my picture, I don't know why I'm not up there, and I'm happy I'm not, because I didn't do anything to prepare.
Hi, Joan.
I'm a Wayne State grad, occupational therapist, and I lived in the North for 67 years, and now I live in Florida, in Tampa Bay area. And I also worked for a while at Wayne State University, but I personally have these problems, and I've worked with lots of other people that do. And I found that exercise is the only positive, consistent, successful thing I do. And there's all kinds of different exercise, but there's a program. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it or seen it, but it's on, I don't know, I can't remember in Michigan, but it's on WEDQ or WEDU, and it's called Sit and Be Fit. Now, for those of you that work full time, it's kind of at a hard time, but if you use your whatever that machine is called to organize things, I'll be 78 next Sunday. So I'm an undergraduate. I mean, I was young when I graduated, but I'm an older person. But anyway, it's a half an hour, and it's just fantastic for stretching and different things. It's not like, for many of you, it might not be rigorous enough. But the other thing I find in addition to that is walking. And I live in Florida, so I can walk now, but when I lived in Michigan, I walked almost all year round. Not in deep snow necessarily, but most of the rest of the time. So that would be just me throwing my 5 cents worth in. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joan. It was interesting. It was eye-opening for me when I talked with these two psychiatrists, and there were different discussions. They didn't know what the other had said. They really focused a lot on those other holistic kinds of things that you could do. So exercise, they really talked about getting out in nature and how much benefit exercise and sleeping could be to managing our physical and our emotional health. And that really surprised me.
Thank you.
Dr. Parnell, your talk is perfect. Timing, thank you. And I say it's perfect because some of us have recently learned that many of our first year students, Black women in particular, return to this semester at a lower rate than many of our other students. So many of us suspect that the reason for that is because so many Black women in particular are stepping away from responsibilities as a student to take care of others, family members. And even though the demographic may be very different, most of them are not married, most of them do not have children. But a lot of the factors that you talked about in terms of cultural pressures, they are experiencing those also. So when I say your timing is perfect, it's because it gives many of us a lot of insight into the things that we can do to help mitigate and address some of those challenges. So again, thank you.
Thank you. And that is a population I hope to get to, the single Black woman, because I know their story is compelling. Yes.
So great presentation, Regina. So the question that I get, I'm wondering how these women are responding to the changes in their routine since the pandemic. Things have changed.
Sure.
But I'm wondering if their response to the change is the same, or is it different? Is it stressful, or is it more stressful or less stressful? So my question is, do you think at some point you're going to track these people, these women, a few years down the road here, just to see whether or not things have changed for them?
I need to repeat it. It's been long enough, but the original IRB permission to do the study did not include keeping information from the previous ones and contacting them to do it again. So I can just put out a call for hurried women and expand that that age range and maybe capture them again. But I am curious as well with this pandemic, the actual physical running from place to place, that's not there. But the cognitive pace of trying to keep all the balls in the air and the kids engaged, that probably is still there. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other question that I had is, what about their spouses?
That's a whole different, that,
You know, did
that's
they
in the paper.
even try to shift some of the responsibilities on the spouses? You know, because I know that culturally, you know, Black women carry a heavy load, but at some point, it's okay to shift the responsibility on, you know, the husband or.
Yeah, so this was done in 2007. I imagine with as the population shifts, the younger population is going to be more equal in those tasks. But this group was still complaining. I've done all of these things, and what is he doing? He's sitting there watching TV. I'm folding the clothes. I'm talking, you know, monitoring homework. I'm making sure the spaghetti don't burn. And he's come in and he's chill. So that was a very real component of the findings, but I stayed with the positive parts about how they managed. Okay. Yes. And again, when I talked about the men, you know, they don't walk in the women's shoes. So when they needed help, they had to be directed as to how to help them. That was very clear. I was going to say, did anyone figure out the twist in the play in terms of Black experience?
Yes. But I'll see if anyone else did. Well, because at some point in time there you had, I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking, that
You're
there
right.
were Blacks passing for whites. So.
Yes, and so that's a very real part of the Black experience that is seldom talked about, but women today still deal with some of that identity. Biracial passing is still an option for some light-skinned Blacks. So yes. Thank you. Thanks, Janetta.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Parnell. This was wonderful and engaging. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. I know this was really informative for me.
Good. Thank you. It's fun.
Yeah. So
Thanks
thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye.